Understanding this helped me understand the Bible so much better, so I want to share it with you. Understanding what a covenant is, right? You've heard this before, but I want to break it down for you and it will help you to understand the Bible so much better. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video, but I promise you if you watch it to the end, it will help you to understand the Bible and Jesus so much better because it helped me to understand the Bible and Jesus so much better. During the time of the people that we read about in the Bible, a covenant was either a marriage between a bride and a groom or a marriage between God and his chosen people. So showing you the marriage process between the bride and the groom at this time, I will show you how the Bible shows us that Jesus came to marry his people, the church. First, the groom or the husband chooses his bride. In John 15:16, Jesus says, "You did not choose me, but I chose you," showing us that he chose us to be his bride. The next step is the husband or the groom decides the price that he is willing to pay to make this woman his bride, right? How much she is worth to him. Somebody who's worth a lot to him, he's going to pay a lot. Somebody who's not worth a lot to him, he's not going to pay a lot. You get it. This is called the bride price. 1 Corinthians 6:20 tells us that we were bought with a price. So what was that price? You are worth so much to Jesus that the price that he was willing to pay for you to be his bride forever was his life. That was the price that he paid for you to have this covenant and marriage with you forever. The next step is the groom or the husband giving the woman that he wants to marry a cup of wine. This cup is called kiddushin, and if the woman accepts the cup and drinks the cup, she is agreeing to marry the man. In John 2, at the wedding of Cana, Jesus' mother Mary tells Jesus to provide the people with wine for the wedding. Jesus responds, "My hour has not come yet," because it was not yet time for him to present his bride with the cup of kiddushin. It was not yet time for him to propose this marriage and covenant with his people. When we turn to Matthew 26, right before the Lord's Supper, Jesus says in verse 18, "My time has come." And then later in that same chapter at the Lord's Supper, in verse 27, Jesus gives his disciples the cup of wine, and he says this, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." This is the kiddushin cup. This is Jesus proposing his covenant and marriage with his disciples, right? And by them accepting it, they're accepting this marriage and covenant with him. And they do that by drinking it. And then notice how Jesus gives them bread and says, "This is my flesh," right? And basically, if we eat the bread, eat the flesh, right, we become one flesh with Jesus. Have you heard about in the Bible where a husband and his wife become one flesh? So practicing communion or Passover is accepting Jesus' marriage and covenant proposal and saying, "Yes, I want to be married and in covenant with you." Remember how I said that there's two cups in the marriage or covenant process? The first cup, kiddushin, is drunk when the bride and the groom become engaged or betrothed. Then the second cup, nisuin, is drunk at the wedding ceremony. And there's a time in between the betrothal and the marriage ceremony. Just like in marriages nowadays, you propose at one point, you wait some time, and then the wedding's later. Like I said, there's some time between the kiddushin being drunk and the nisuin being drunk because there's some time between the betrothal and the wedding ceremony. In verse 29, Jesus says this, "I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Jesus is pointing towards the wedding ceremony where we will share this cup with him. Along with the presenting of the cup, there's what's called the agreement of the ketubah, or the wedding agreement, basically the vows. What the husband promises to do for the bride to stay married, and what the bride promises to do for the husband to stay married. There's some rules that we're responsible for keeping in order to stay in this covenant and marriage with Jesus. There's an old covenant and a new covenant. The ketubah in the old covenant, or the things that we had to do to stay in marriage and covenant with God, was to follow all of the rules in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, to completely uphold the law. The old covenant was the agreement or the ketubah of the law. Basically, if you broke one of the commandments and sinned, you were breaking your side of the ketubah, right? And therefore, you broke your marriage with God. That marriage or covenant was under the law. But the new covenant is under grace, and let me explain this. Everything changed on the cross. Jesus died so that sin couldn't end our marriage with him. What I mean by this is that in order to be in covenant or marriage with God forever, we need to be without sin and the righteousness of God. Jesus died to take the blame for our sin and give us the credit for his righteousness. So therefore, through faith, we become without sin and the righteousness of God. Everything required to be in marriage and covenant with God. So therefore, we now have a new ketubah or a new agreement with God. Rather than us having to follow all the commandments in order to be married with God, all he requires is faith. wanting to be in marriage with him and believing that he did everything for us so that we could be. Therefore, sin can't end this marriage that we have with God. Only the absence of faith can. We still try to follow the commandments, but failing to do so doesn't end our marriage with God. But the next step is the husband goes away to his father's house and makes a place for the bride to stay. And when the time is right, the husband comes back, gets his wife, he brings her to his father's house, they have the wedding ceremony, and they live together married forever. And in John 14:2-3, Jesus says, "In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." God showed John a vision of the wedding between Jesus and his bride, the church, those who believe in him, at the end of time. This is found in Revelation 21:2-4. It says, "And I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man, and he will dwell with them, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away."